Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter number 14, the modes of material nature, text number 20. Gunanetan atitya dehi deha samudbhavan janma mrityu jara dukhe vimukto amritam ashnute. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. When the embodied being is able to transcend these three modes associated with the material body, he can become free from birth, death, old age, and their distresses and can enjoy nectar even in this life. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmanitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. So we are continuing with chapter number 14, which is modes of material nature. We've been hearing so far that there are three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And Krishna is giving knowledge to Arjuna how we can transcend these three modes and come to the mode of pure goodness, which is the stage where one is free from distress. So today's topic will be, how can one be situated in transcendence with the help of the knowledge from these few verses from verse number 20 towards the end of this chapter. Now, in this verse that I just recited in Sanskrit, it's talking about if one transcends these three modes, then one does not come back into the cycle of birth and death again, which means then one receives a spiritual body and goes to the spiritual world and then enjoys nectar over there. But Krishna says one can enjoy that spiritual nectar even while in this material body. So the question is, how can one situate oneself in that transcendence? The knowledge from Bhagavad Gita helps us to not only transcend, but to remain on that stage. So if we follow the instructions from Bhagavad Gita, then we'll be able to achieve that. Now we've heard from chapter 2 onwards how the spirit soul, we are spirit souls and we are entrapped in this material body. And because we are in this material body, we get conditioned, and then all these modes of material nature affect us. You know, if sometimes we may be in the mode of goodness, sometimes in passion, and sometimes in ignorance. But from this chapter, we are going to learn how we can go to that transcendental stage and remain happy all the time. Now, we heard in chapter 9 about the value of this Bhagavad Gita. It said, Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam. That this Bhagavad Gita is the king of education, and it also says Susukham Karta. That means it gives complete joy and happiness. So if somehow or the other we can take the instructions from Bhagavad Gita and put it into practice, then we will definitely enjoy happiness and joy. And that happiness will be spiritual happiness. Now the question is, how? That is $1 million question. Just by understanding that I am not this body, I am the spirit soul which is situated in the body, and understanding how these modes of material nature are working, how we are performing our actions. Now we learned in chapter number 3 and 5, which is Karma Yoga, where Krishna teaches us how we should perform our actions so that there are no reactions. That's very, very important, because we have heard that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if we perform our activities in a particular mode, then we will be entangled in the reactions of that mode, of that action. So in chapter 3 and 5, we learned that we should perform actions according to the scriptures. and not desire to enjoy the fruits of our actions, then we remain disentangled. There is no entanglement. So Krishna is explaining that if we work in that consciousness and we perform devotional service, then we will attain liberation. In chapter 3, Krishna says, Yagnarthat karmanonyatra lokoyam karma bandhana, that work performed as a sacrifice for the Lord has to be performed. Otherwise, the work causes bondage, which means entanglement. So if we want to transcend these modes of material nature, then we need to perform our actions in a particular consciousness. So it's just a change of consciousness. It's not that we have to leave our family, go to the mountains, give up our jobs, etc. No, we don't need to do all that. All we need to do is change our consciousness. And the very first step to transcend these three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, is to do mantra meditation on a daily basis. When we do the meditation, especially the mantra meditation regularly, then those sound vibrations, they help to change our consciousness. The actions remain the same, but the state of consciousness changes. Now, in the very next verse of this chapter, we see that Arjuna has asked very, very important questions that are relevant to us also. And he also wanted to know, what are the symptoms of someone who has transcended these three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, and has come to the state of pure goodness? What are the symptoms? So these questions should be our questions too, So first of all, we need to understand how to transcend. Then we can know, whether we have those symptoms or we don't have those symptoms. Sometimes self-evaluation is necessary, but most of the times it's better to get ourselves evaluated by someone who is more experienced, by basically maybe someone who is a certified teacher of the Bhagavad Gita. We can get an evaluation from them. Then we can understand, how we are progressing on this path. You see, in any sphere of life, we need guidance. We need a teacher, whether it's in school, in college, universities, whether we want to learn some art, music, dancing, whatever, we definitely need a teacher. So also, for us to understand spirituality, we also need a teacher, an experienced teacher. And the first thing that the teacher is going to talk about is following rules and regulations. Just like when we enroll our children in school, the parents are aware and they make the children aware that there are certain rules and regulations that need to be followed in school. There is discipline. For instance, the school starts at 8 a.m. And so my child cannot say, oh, I feel like going at 9 a.m. No, the rule is the school starts at 8 a.m. and that's the rule for everybody. So regulation is very, very important. Now, we talked about the 4 rules of spirituality, I think 2 or 3 classes before, where we discussed that how the spiritual life is based on 4 pillars, 4 spiritual pillars. And for those 4 spiritual pillars to be strong, we need to follow 4 regulative principles so that our spiritual life is very strong. So here we see that Arjuna has asked these questions for our benefit. And so Krishna, from verse 22 to 25, he talks about the symptoms of someone who has transcended these 3 modes of material nature. The first thing that he talks about is that person is not attached, is not in delusion, is not unwavering, is completely undisturbed, is neutral, is self-realized, and is happy in every situation, He does not get distressed in any situation, and regards, there's equanimity, there is what you can call an equal vision. It doesn't matter, there is no duality, whether there's happiness, distress, heat, cold, success, failure, whatever it may be, fame, infamy, it does not matter, because that person has controlled the senses, is very steady, it does not treat anyone, as an enemy, etc., etc. So many symptoms are given to Arjuna by Krishna, so that we can evaluate ourselves. Have I, been successful in getting all these qualities? If I have, then boom, I have transcended the three modes of material nature. So basically, if a person has reached the stage of pure goodness, not just goodness, it's not good enough to be good. We have to go beyond that. So when a person is in the stage of pure goodness, then that person is not envious. There is no hankering, there is no lamentation. Why? Because that person has understood the basic knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, which is, I am not this body, I am the spirit soul. Right in the beginning in chapter 2, we learned, there are more than 22 verses explaining the qualities of the spirit soul, how the spirit soul is eternal. It has no birth, no death. It is everlasting, ever existing. No one can kill the soul. So we being eternal, if we understand that and put that into practice, then we can successfully raise ourselves above the body concept of life. Then the meditation is not only about this body, how to make this body happy, how to make it comfortable. Yes, that is required, but that is not the only goal of life. Then that person is focusing on the spirit soul also. Just like we feed the body every day to make, so that it has strength, it's, and there is energy, and we can do what we want to do. Similarly, we need to feed the soul, and the food for the soul is mantra meditation that we do after every class for a few minutes. And that is what gives the energy to the soul. That is what helps us to even purify our consciousness. So here we can see that to be able to go beyond these three modes of material nature, the senses need to be under control. Just imagine, that just consider, make a visual out of this, that there is a chariot, so consider that this body is like a chariot, and our five senses, they are the five horses. The mind is the reins of those horses. The driver, the intelligence is the driver, and we, the spirit soul, are the passenger. So which means the passenger, the soul, is sitting on the chariot, which is this body, and the horses are being driven. The driver has the reins in hand, is controlling the reins, which means the intelligence is controlling the mind, so that the horses, which are the senses, can be under control. So the big responsibility is on the intelligence, the driver, because if the driver does not control the reins, which means the mind properly, then the horses, which are the senses, will go wild. There will be no control. So to control the senses, the mind has to be under control. To control the mind, the intelligence should be fed with knowledge. That is how one is able to control the senses. And the best and the easiest way to control senses is to do mantra meditation on a daily basis, because those sound vibrations, they feed the intelligence, they purify the mind and the senses. So that is a very, very nice way to control the senses. Just like, say, supposing I have a disease, and obviously I'll go to a doctor, a medical doctor, for diagnosis. And when the doctor, gives me some medication, But along with medication, the doctor will also give me some instructions, probably to follow a particular diet or something, whatever, so that I can get relief from my diseased condition and I can be healthy again. So also the same is, effective in spirituality. So we are diseased. Now one may say, what do you mean by disease? Because I'm healthy, I don't have any issues, no problem. Diseased in the sense that most people, most of us, we are on the body concept of life. We only think about the body. The meditation is, I am this body, I need to feed this body, everything is about the body. So that is a diseased condition. Why? Because we've forgotten our constitutional position, which is to be the spirit soul. We are the spirit soul. So to remove that diseased condition, the medicine is mantra meditation. So that is the medicine that is going to help us to come out of this diseased situation as far as spirituality is concerned. So only way for us to, become free, to become permanently happy, the only way is that we understand this knowledge from Bhagavad Gita, put it into practice, and the best way is, to perform some service, devotional service, and that is one step to transcend these three modes of material nature. Then we will not get affected by the dualities of life, as I was saying, happiness, distress, success, failure, honor, dishonor, fame, infamy, all these things will not affect us. Why? Because we are taking on the knowledge and putting it into practice. Now, Krishna also tells Arjuna, one of the symptoms of someone who has transcended the modes, or someone who has been situated in transcendence, is that person considers every living entity as a friend. Now, by every living entity, it means it could be animals, birds, aquatics, human beings, everyone, every entity that is living, that is conscious, that person is a friend to all of them. And it's possible to really recognize that or realize that only when we take on the knowledge. So that is how it helps. Now, in verse number 26, Krishna gives the formula, the formula how one can, go beyond ignorance, passion, and goodness, and come to pure goodness, that stage. How? He says, anyone who performs full devotional service. Now, in chapter 12, which is entitled Devotional Service, we got a lot of knowledge from Krishna. What exactly is devotional service? How should one perform devotional service? You see, so he's saying anyone who performs full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances. You see, what happens when we, I'm not sure if you all do that, but many people, when they are, working, say, on a project or on a job or doing something, let's say I want to learn dancing, and then, I go to few classes, and then I'm like, it's too boring, and then just give it up, or, not so enthusiastic about, continuing on that path, or continuing, to learn to dance or whatever it is. So sometimes, there are some situations, or that we fail, okay, forget it, now I don't want to learn dancing, let me learn music, let me do this or that. So there is no determination to stay on and stick to it. So when it comes to devotional service, Krishna says such a person is unfailing in all circumstances. Then one is able to transcend and come to that situation where the person is situated in transcendence, which means pure goodness. Now that would mean that that person is constantly hearing, constantly remembering, constantly engaged in mantra meditation, constantly practicing devotional service. You know, Krishna has given us this very nice verse in the Bhagavad Gita where he says, Yat karoshi, yat ashnashi, yat juhoshi, dadashi yat. He says, whatever you do, whatever charity you give, whatever actions you perform, whatever you do it as an offering unto me. Now one may say, why Krishna? Because the Vedas give us the knowledge that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. And that is why we give it to him, because he is the supreme personality of Godhead. So when we do that, then we do not face any reactions, right? There are no more entanglements. Now that consciousness actually is belonging to a bhakti yogi, someone who's practicing bhakti yoga. Bhakti means devotion. Yoga is to connect with the Supreme Lord. So bhakti yoga is actually a connection that we make with the Supreme Lord. And the most important ingredient in devotional service is unfailing determination. So it cannot be wavering that, okay, today I want to, tomorrow I don't want to know. Because Krishna is telling Arjuna that these three modes of material nature, they are very difficult to overcome. They're very difficult to transcend, but it is possible. If one is determined, then one will be able to. Just like, I start a business, and my son is very kind enough and he is ready to finance the business. He puts in a lot of money, and I start the business, and then after a few days I lose interest. There is no determination there. I'm like, I don't feel like, I don't want to take on more knowledge. I don't want to, work on this business, etc. What is going to happen? It's going to be a failure. So similarly, it's the same in spirituality. If there is no determination, then we really cannot progress. We cannot transcend these three modes of material nature. Now, we've heard that Krishna says, Mamai Vamsha Jivaloke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatana, that we are eternal parts of Krishna. And because he is transcendental, we are also spiritual and transcendental, but that's the spirit soul. But we are encaged in this material body. So because we are here in the material world, we get contaminated in the sense, we get influenced by whatever is around us, influenced by our association, influenced by what we eat, etc. So that is a form of contamination. Let's say, let me give you an example. The rainwater, right? When it rains, it's pure. That water is pure, it's uncontaminated. But when that same water falls in a muddy area, immediately that water becomes muddy. Originally, the rainwater is pure, but because it is in touch with the mud, it has become contaminated. Similarly, we spirit souls, we are pure, we are eternal, parts of the Lord, but because we are encaged in this material body, in this material world, that is why we are kind of contaminated. Now, to remove this contamination, Krishna has given us the formula in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says, Satatam Kirtayanto Mam, that we should chant the holy names, mantra meditation, and then we will be able to really progress to the transcendental position, or as today's topic is, how can one be situated in transcendence? And this is the formula given to us by Krishna himself. So for us to attain that stage of bliss, complete bliss, and also which is permanent bliss, we will need to follow the step-by-step program, step-by-step process. Then it'll be possible to do that. But if we want to enjoy in this world, we want to be the Lord of all I survey, we want to control everyone, then Krishna tells Arjuna in this chapter towards the end, then that person comes back into this material world. Now, then once we come back into this material world, yes, this session is recorded and I'm going to post it on the YouTube channel. And you can even hear the previous recordings. So here is the list where you can hear the recordings. So Krishna is saying that if we do not, follow this process and we keep getting entangled, then we will definitely come back into this material world, which is called reincarnation, which we already studied in chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 5, in many places in the Bhagavad Gita. So how can we make sure that we are able to go beyond these three modes, ignorance, passion, and goodness? How can we do that? Then the very first step is hearing. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Pada Sevanam. This is what Prahlad Maharaj tells us in Srimad Bhagavatam. That first step is to hear. Just like all of us are doing, we are hearing the Bhagavad Gita, right? So when we hear and take on this knowledge, then the next step is to chant, to do that mantra meditation. And when we do that in, association of like-minded people, then the effect is more powerful. Like some time ago, I used to have these sessions on the phone where, some of us would, do the conference call and we would chant together, we would chant for maybe, a few minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, or whatever. We would get together at least once a week and we would chant together, on the conference call. So if any of you are interested, I can restart that and we can, have a phone number dedicated to chanting where we come together and we chant together, and it's so blissful. That is one way, that after hearing we can do chanting, and that way we can also progress in spirituality. So now, to summarize this whole chapter, I know most of you have missed out on from the beginning of this chapter up till now, till verse 20. But the summary of the chapter is that someone who is in the mode of goodness, right? That person, Krishna says, is in knowledge, is free from sinful activities, and but is conditioned by the sense of happiness. But someone who's in the mode of passion, that person has unlimited desires and, is engaged in fruitive activity, like, let me do this and I'm going to get this fruit and I'm going to enjoy. But someone who's in the mode of ignorance, that person is very lazy, is wanting to sleep all the time, or, is kind of intoxicated. But someone who is in the mode of pure goodness, has the qualities of someone in the mode of goodness, but also is getting purified because is doing mantra meditation, is hearing, is eating a prasadam, which is food which is first offered to the Supreme Lord, and doing activities which I explained, like akarma, which means performing actions according to the scriptures, but not desiring to enjoy the fruits of those activities. And someone who's in the mode of pure goodness is equipoised and is not affected by dualities. So this is what the summary of this chapter is, between goodness, passion, and ignorance, and then finally about pure goodness. So now the million-dollar question again: how to transcend these three modes and how to be situated in transcendence. Krishna says that person has to perform full devotional service. And that full devotional service starts with mantra meditation. That person needs to become fully conscious of the Lord, work for him. There has to be determination, should be above the bodily concept of life, should understand what is my constitutional position. My constitutional position, Krishna says, Jivera Swarupoy Krishnera Nityadas. The constitutional position of the spirit soul is to be the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord Krishna. So when a person starts this mantra meditation, then one is able to transcend these modes and be situated in transcendence. So before I put on, open the floor for questions or comments, I will do a little bit of mantra meditation just to give you an idea. Now, the links that I sent you at the bottom is the mantra that we are going to chant, and it's called the Maha Mantra. So if you like, you can chant with me. So let's just chant for a few minutes, if you don't mind, okay? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So you see, I just chanted 10 times, but if there are 108 beads in this whole mala, it is called, and it takes about, I would say, 8 to 9 minutes to chant this 108 times. And I think 10 minutes, every day is not a big deal. I know most of you are chanting like Srinivas, Leela, Manoj, Isel, Parijat, Shivani, Stacy. Most of you all are chanting on a daily basis. I think Michael and Raksha has come for the first time. Welcome all of you. And I'll stop now. If any of you have any questions or comments, you're welcome to ask.